that good for you? It's good for me too. Didn't plan on starting that way. I don't know where that came from. So here's how I was going to start. So there's this Catholic family, this very devout Catholic family, and part of their practice is during Lent they don't eat meat on Fridays. They have this neighbor who is a Baptist, and he cooks meat every Friday. And so he's out barbecuing, and there's these wonderful smells of all, this meat coming over the fence, and they're very tempted by this. And so they go through the entire Lent season and think, there's only one solution. We have to convert this guy to Catholicism. So they go over and they start, spending time with him and becoming friends, and they invite him to their church, and he comes and several times, and finally he decides he's going to become a Catholic. So during the baptismal ceremony, the priest is sprinkling water on his forehead, and he says, "You were born a Baptist, you were raised a Baptist, now you're a Catholic." And so the Catholic family figures problem solved. Next year comes around in Lent, and it's first Friday in Lent, and they smell the same smells coming over the fence. So they go in the backyard, and they look over there, and there's the guy barbecuing a big old filet mignon, and he's sprinkling water on it, and he says, "You were born a cow, you were raised a cow, now you're a fish." So, why was this guy barbecuing? He was doing it for joy, right? That's something that brought him joy, and he found a workaround. Yeah? So how many of you here today have a joy in your heart? Anyone, by a show of hands? Quite a few of you. Any of you today have a sadness in your heart? Anyone? Yeah? Anyone have both, a joy and a sadness? Isn't that interesting, how we can have both joy and sadness at the same time? I have come to the conclusion that life is all about joy. So how can it be all about joy if there's also sadness? Well, joy to me, the definition of joy to me is not the opposite of sadness. That would be happiness to me. Joy is this all-encompassing spiritual quality that can be present at any moment in time, no matter what's going on. In fact, it can even be even more present in moments of challenge or sadness. So my mother passed away last December 24th, exactly 49 years from when my father died on December 24th. Isn't it interesting? And she had never remarried. And I really felt like, by the way, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I feel inspired to. I really felt like there was a reason she was waiting, because she'd had a stroke a week before. When she came home from the hospital, it wasn't expected that she'd live more than a couple days, and she lasted 5 days. It was like she was trying to make it to Christmas Eve. And, it was so interesting because our whole family was there with us. We thought about canceling our normal get-together because we knew it was close, and the hospice person said, "No, I think it'll be good for her." And it was, and all the family got to go and say goodbye to her. And there was just a few family members left at the end of the evening, and I was sitting there alone with her, and my wife came into the room to give her some medication, and I was there for about 45 minutes with her. And my wife came in, was going to give her some medication, and she took her last breath. And then the few family members came in, and she got to have her family surrounding her as she made that transition. And, during that time, and when we had our Christmas Eve ceremony, or candle lighting ceremony here, it was right in the midst of all of this. And so, of course, there's a lot of sadness for me, but there's also this joy that came out of how connected I felt. And Linda Legman said something to me that night. She said, when this happened in my life, there was a lot of sadness, but there was also this aliveness. And I so related to it. It was so true. It's like that entire week, the conversations I had went deeper. My coaching sessions with my clients were more insightful. There's something that happens in that deep sadness, or those moments of realness, right? That where there is this larger experience. We experience ourselves perhaps as being larger when we're in those moments. And there's an opportunity, therefore, to create greater joy. You know, The Magic of the Soul, my book, The Magic of the Soul, when I started this practice of looking for the magic in every experience, it certainly brought more joy into my life. But it was more about, it began as a practice to give up to resistance to what is, to not be resisting what's happening in life. Because anytime we resist something, we create a block in energy. And the energy that we're blocking is the energy of love. Yeah? So when I surrender, when I let go, then the love flows. And so it began as a practice of just keeping that flow going. But what I didn't realize is that I was on a path of joy. That the more I practiced this, looking for the magic in every experience, or you can use synonyms for that, looking for the opportunity for growth, the more I found that by not resisting anything, that I was embarking on this path of joy. And that an interesting byproduct came from this, is I found that the more I gave up resistance to what is, the more easily I was able to create what I want. Does that make sense? In fact, I wrote down my own little quote here. The ease in which I create what I want is directly related to the degree to which I accept what is. Yeah? So life is all about joy. And it's interesting, I did a practitioner, led a practitioner retreat for about 50 practitioners and prac students recently, and I was talking about this very thing, and I was finding that it was kind of a new idea to people to live from a place of joy consistently. And I thought, well, why is that? And I have a lot of practitioners that I coach and counsel. And I find it interesting that our teaching doesn't necessarily naturally lead to a place of joy. The emphasis tends to be in our teaching on creating what we want. But it's this ability to accept what is that I find leads us into joy. And Ernest Holmes said, life is not just something to be endured, it is to be lived in joy, in a fullness without limit. This is a different quote from this is beyond science of mind. This is science of the heart, right? And I've heard many people use that expression. Our movement started out as science of the mind, but is becoming a science of the heart. We have a song to sing, we have a joy to bring to the world, and love and peace and happiness. Isn't that beautiful? Let's take a deep breath into that. So, Byron Katie. How many Byron Katie fans here? I know there's some down front. Byron Katie has a book called 1,000 Names for Joy. And the idea is that everything can be named joy, right? It's what we call it. And if we find ourselves in really challenging times, I would say the secret is to surrender. Byron Katie talks about being clear about what's other people's business, what's my business, and what's God's business, right? And my take on that is anything that I cannot change easily and effortlessly is God's business. And if I recognize that, then what would it be like to just decide to be in joy? To decide to name this joy no matter what, this day joy no matter what happens. How would life be then? Because guess what? Who has the power to decide what we name anything? We do, right? So I'll tell you how I really deepened this experience for myself. We just got done teaching Busting Loose to the Money Game on Thursday nights. Yeah, let's have a cheer for Busting Loose from the class, the people in the class. See how exuberant they are? We had a lot of fun. Man, it was a great class. So one of the things I learned in practicing this is Robert Scheinfeld in the book talks about living in reactive mode. And I I translate that to responsive mode. And what that means is you wake up in the morning, you decide, you look at what your day looks like, what pops into your hologram is the term he uses, and decide, what do I want to do with this? What will bring me the most joy today? What will bring me the most joy today? I know this might seem like and then do that, right? Now that sounds like a radical concept, right? So if I'm scheduled to go to work, but it would bring me joy to go to the beach today, how do I kind of justify those? I would encourage you to give this a try. Well, first I'll tell you how I did it. So I decided, I've gotten pretty far with practicing this practice of busting loose from the money game, which is living in a place of joy, but I haven't gotten to the place where I've really tried living in responsive mode. So I decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to get up every day, and I did this for about 5 months, every day, and decide what will bring me joy today, and I'll do that. So if I had clients, I would do those phone calls. I would think to myself, do I want to do this? And absolutely, I get so much joy out of doing my coaching and my counseling. But if I didn't feel like working on the computer because I had to get some promotion out or do something else, I wouldn't do it. If I felt like sitting down in the middle of the afternoon watching an HBO movie, I would do that. If I felt like taking an extended nap, I would do that. Things I'd never do before. And I stopped promoting myself the way I used to promote myself. In fact, I used to, when I go to centers and I'd speak, when I travel around, I'd invite people to sign up on my mailing list, and they'd check this box. Then they'll get an email from me and then a phone call, and we'll set up a complimentary session, and then we do that, and then a certain amount of percentage of those people would become my clients, and that's how I build my business. It worked really well. And I decided, I just don't feel like doing that. So I didn't do that for about 4 or 5 months. And so I wasn't getting new clients from that way, and I had the natural attrition, and I would have thought logically that my business would be going down, but it didn't. It actually went up a little bit. And I thought, well, how did that happen? I was getting clients from other places that I never got clients. By the way, I'm testing the theory that, because this is the theory in the book, the theory that my prosperity, my good, my love, my joy, that nothing comes from what I do, and everything I experience comes from what I feel inside. Right? If I feel prosperous, prosperity will find me no matter what I do. Yeah? That's what our teaching says, right? But this is really testing it to a really high level, isn't it? And then what happened is a funny thing happened. On the way to joy, is I decided that all those things I used to do, the way I promoted my business, I actually enjoyed them. I enjoyed connecting with people after the workshop and sending an email and calling them and talking with them and setting up a complimentary session and doing the complimentary session. Whether they signed up or not, I enjoyed that. And so I decided to start doing that again, but I did it in a different way. I didn't do it anymore because I thought I had to in order to maintain or increase my success. I did it for one reason and one reason only, for the joy of it, right? And so I scheduled things differently. I didn't think, okay, it's been 7 days since I did a workshop, so I got to call these people tonight, which I would before do, whether I felt like it or not. And of course, I wouldn't be in the greatest mood, so it wouldn't be as much fun. I decided I would wait. I'll wait months sometimes before I call people, and I'll say, hey, I feel like calling people tonight. I'll call them up. Whoever wants to do it, wants to do it, and we'll have some fun. I stopped scheduling rather than 5 or 6 sessions in a day, because my theory was the more sessions I schedule beyond my paid sessions, if I add 2 or 3 complimentary sessions, then that means I'll get more clients faster, right? Again, thinking that it's what I do that will bring me prosperity. And so now I rarely schedule more than 3 clients in a day, no matter what. So whenever I am with my clients, I am fresh, I'm alive, I'm having fun. I'm doing it for joy. And once this all started happening, my business exploded. I don't have enough room for all my clients now. So, thank you. So if you want to be my client, sorry. I'll squeeze you in. Anyone here today, I'll squeeze you in. So, if you have a day job and you wake up in the morning and you feel like, what will bring me joy today? And you feel like going to the beach, I'm going to encourage you today to go to the beach. Right? What's the worst that could happen? You get fired. Maybe it's not the right job for you. Here's the thing. This is a possible scenario that might occur. So you go to the beach that day, and that feels really good. And the next day you wake up and you think, what do I want to do today? That was really fun yesterday. I think I'll go to the beach again today. And then let's say you do this 3 or 4 days in a row. Eventually, maybe not, but eventually you're probably going to get bored just going to the beach. You're going to want to do something else. You might even decide you miss some of those people at work and your projects and the things that, had meaning for you. Unless you really hate your job, well then probably, if you're hating your job, you're probably not doing that for joy. But let's just stick with that scenario. So, or let's say that you go 2 weeks going to the beach every day and you decide, oh, my work doesn't want to pay me now. And then you think, well, I do get a lot of joy from receiving my paycheck. So then you might decide, I think I'll go back to going to work again, right? But the difference now is by doing what brought you joy for these couple weeks, now you're deciding to go to work for the joy that you get from the paycheck, right? So now you're doing it for joy. Everything that we do in life, every decision we make, whether we think about it or not consciously, we're doing it for joy, or at least because we think it'll bring us more joy than the alternative. Not, going to work, being homeless, But we don't always recognize that. We think, oh, I've got to go to work, right? I have to do this. Or think about all the things in your life that you think you have to do. What would be like if you just really looked at, okay, why am I really doing this? What is the joy that's coming from this? And what I think you'll find is the more that you focus on the joy, and you can do this for things too, I have clients who don't like to work out, right? I like to work out, but some people don't like to work out. But how does it feel after you work out? And most of them will say, that feels really good, right? So when you're thinking about whether you're going to work out or not, focus on the joy you'll feel after having accomplished it. And you might just find that when you are accomplishing it, you're more joyful, right? Focus on the end. What you're doing when you do that is you are focusing on the larger picture. Rather than instant gratification, that's not joy, right? That's like happiness or instant gratification. True joy is something that's lasting. There's a line in the movie, The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel. Anyone see that movie? So the main character in this movie had tricked all these elderly people to coming to this retirement home in India by brushing up the brochure in Photoshop. So this dilapidated hotel looked like this beautiful exotic place. And so when they get there and find out it's horrible, they're all coming to him and complaining. And so his line in the movie is, should I do it with or without the Indian accent? I'll try it. I'll give it a try here. So he says, in India, we have this special saying, and that is that everything will work out and everything will be all right in the end. And he says, and if it's not all right, it's not yet the end. Right? So we can be in joy in any moment. We can find a reason to be in joy. When people who have survived life-threatening illnesses, terminal illnesses, and I think it's interesting that we even have a term called terminal cancer anymore, because there's so many people who have survived terminal cancer that it's kind of ludicrous to still have that term, right? But when you talk to people who have survived a life-threatening illness, they will tell you, especially if it's near after the time that they have survived, that they have come through it and realize they're going to be okay. You will hear them say things like, and I've been in this situation twice in my life, and I've talked about this in some of my lectures, and people will come up to me and say, you're right. Every moment is precious. Even a moment of pain has beauty in it because it tells me that I'm alive. It reminds me that I'm here. It reminds me I have the opportunity to interact, that there's joy in everything, including the difficulties in life. 10,000 names for joy, isn't it? It's 1,000? Well, I say it's 10,000. It's 1,000,000. It's infinite. It's infinite. Infinite. So, we want to be in joy? Are we in joy right now? Yes. Where does joy come from? From within. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so let's see. What else do I want to play with here? By the way, that's interesting that word just came out of me. Whenever I hear people say the word work, and not only I'm going to go to work, but oftentimes, even in spiritual things, I hear people say over and over, I'm going to work on that. I've got to work on that some more. As I try transplanting the word play every time you hear the word work. See what happens. I'm going to play with that instead of work at it. Okay? I'm going to go to play instead of go to work today. I'm telling you, since living in responsive mode, now virtually everything I do for joy. Everything I do is play for me. And the more that happens, the more life just throws, if I told you some of the things that have been happening to me, in the Busting Loose in the Money Game, Robert Scheinfeld says, when you get into phase 2, which is simply living life from a place of joy, weird things start to happen. One of them is, I'm not wearing the shirt today, but I was in Canada. I told this in the class. I was in Canada doing some play up there. And see, I catch myself. And so I was staying with a client up there. I stayed with a couple clients, and one of them, he walks into the room, and he's wearing this white shirt, and I'm just thinking, wow, that shirt looks so good on Mark. It fits him perfectly. It's just like, where could I get a shirt like that? 2 minutes later, he says, Patrick, I lost a lot of weight lately. This is feeling really, really loose on me. Can I give you this shirt? And at the time, I didn't think that was weird. It just seemed very natural. And then I thought back and thought, how often? This guy literally gave me the shirt off his back. How often does that happen, And that's kind of weird. But I find, I used to, when I would go and lecture and book gigs, I used to think, okay, I tell people what my price is, and if they weren't willing to meet my price, I thought, okay, then I can't do it because I'm not valuing what I do. And now what I decided, because, my prosperity doesn't come from what people pay me at all. I totally get that. So now I tell them, this is my normal price. Pay me whatever you want. And guess what they do? They almost always now pay me more than I ask. Isn't that interesting? So the other thing I want to emphasize here is the relationship between love and joy. The relationship between self-love and joy. Carl Rogers said, the curious paradox is that when I accept myself as I am, then I can change. So the same thing in talking about resisting, if we're resisting anything in life, Robert Scheinfeld says that our judgment about anything or everything is the glue that holds our limitations in place. So it's about giving up about judgment about what's happening in the world, but what about giving up judgment about myself? What about giving myself a break? When I talk with my clients about this, the true test of self-love is not loving ourselves when we do some really cool stuff. When I got a raise at my job, or I just solved some incredible mathematical problem, or I just helped somebody out and they're giving me praise. It's easy to love myself then. It's when I get fired, or when I do something that causes someone else or someone else experiences pain as a result of something I do, or I make a mistake that costs me a lot of money. If I can love myself then that is the true test of self-love. So the phrase I like to use is love yourself no matter what. Would that be so hard to do, people? Yeah, to just love myself no matter what. It's not that hard. It's a practice, and we get better and better at it. Anytime we feel discomfort, as Debbie Ford said recently, she said an interesting thing. She said, stop telling people that that their thinking makes them sick. And I agree with that to a degree. I do believe we create our reality, we create our experience. And yet we create our experience. Well, I'm not going to go into that; it'd take too long. But the point I want to make here is that to simply, I forgot my point. Never mind. it was something pretty good. We'll come back to that. So I think it's time for another joke. All right. So. Shut up. Were you talking to me? Now, I'm just a reflection of you, so you must be talking to yourself there, huh? All right, so I'm going to tell you one more little story here about, I've told this joke here before, but it fits perfectly this topic. So there's these three guys out for a game of golf, a bright sunny afternoon. First guy steps up to the tee, and you've probably heard of him. His name is Moses. So Moses has been practicing. He's really been working on his golf game, by the way. And so working on a game, see what I mean? So he's taking this real serious practice swings, and he lets it go, and the ball's shooting out over the fairway. And but it's going to land short before this lake. And so it's headed straight for the lake. He steps out. He raises up his club, and the waters part, and the ball just sails right through onto the green, about 20 feet from the cup. So the next guy comes up, and his name is, you've probably heard of him too. It's called Jesus. So he's been working on his game too, and he's really practicing. He's really taking some good strokes. He lets it rip. It's going out even further than Moses' ball, but it's going to land right in the lake. So he just steps out. He raises his hand. The ball stops about 6 inches from the water, and he just calmly walks out on the lake, taps the ball onto the green about 10 feet from the cup. Third guy comes up, and this guy's completely the opposite of the second two. He's not concentrating at all. He's like laughing and joking, and he takes this wild one-handed swipe at the ball and slices it way off over the fence onto the freeway. It's ricocheting between cars. It bounces back over the fence onto this caddy shack, rolls down the side of the roof, down to the rain gutter. It goes down the rain gutter to the drain pipe, down out the drain pipe, onto the fairway. It's rolling for that same lake. It hits a rock. It bounces up. It lands in the lake on a lily pad. A frog comes up and snatches the ball. Just then, an eagle swoops down, snatches up the frog. Going over the green, the frog screams. The ball drops out of its mouth, down into the cup. And Moses turns to Jesus and says, God, I hate playing with your dad. So the results are better regardless of what we do, the how of it, how we get there. The results are better when we do it for joy. Yeah? Okay. So I'll finish with one more story about Vivian King, who was my teacher in psychosynthesis, spiritual psychology. And she was, after I finished my 4 years training with her, she moved out of the state to New Mexico, so I hadn't seen her for a while. And then I was at this New Year's Eve party, and one of the people there was my classmate, one of my classmates in the third year. And she said, did you hear what happened to Vivian? I said, no. And she said she was hit by a drunk driver and has become a quadriplegic. She was in a coma for 6 weeks. It was brainstem damage, and her head was the size of a basketball. And so I went to visit her when she had been moved to Long Beach. So I went to visit her, and she was better then. Her head was no longer a basketball, but they were deciding where to move her. And just the synchronicity of me being there, as I said, I live in the San Fernando Valley because that was one of two places, either going to be Orange County or the San Fernando Valley. And so I said, well, if she comes to the San Fernando Valley, I can, come in and help with her physical therapy and help out and so on. They ended up, and they didn't know where I lived, but they ended up moving her, and she ended up a block away from where I lived. So I ended up being able to go and help her out and do some energy healing and spiritual mind treatment and physical therapy. And as I'm doing all these things, it might sound like I'm doing a lot for her, but I was the one who was getting the gift, okay? She was a saint of a woman, and she taught me and everyone around her so many lessons. Now, for example, she would be feeding herself with what they called an electronic arm, and it would just bring her, because she didn't want other people to feed her. She wanted to be able to do it herself. And she'd have on a bib, and she'd be getting it all over her face and all over her bib. And as I described this, you might think, oh, she might have felt uncomfortable doing this, right? I would feel uncomfortable doing that. I would have felt embarrassed, probably. But not so. She had a big, impish grin on her face the entire time. She saw the cosmic joke about it. She knew that she was not her body. She knew that she was something greater than that. And so she said to me about a year before she died, she said, and you could hear her, she couldn't speak, but she could speak in whispers, and that was amplified. So you could, if you were with her a lot, you could learn to hear what she was saying. She said, Patrick, I'm a teacher who can no longer speak. I'm a writer who can no longer write. But as long as I have a physical body, I can remain a presence of peace and joy and love in this world. Is that powerful? So when I am in those dark places, I often think about Vivian and think if she could be in joy, in that situation, I can be in joy no matter what. So thank you. Love you.